Welcome to The Explainer. I am literally so thrilled to have you here today. If you're a student of political science, or honestly, if you're just fascinated by the hidden mechanics of politics, the actual gears and levers that make our systems run, or in this case, completely fail to run, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're taking a really hard, analytical look at the systemic breakdown of modern American political parties. We're going to examine this massive shift we've seen from traditional party gatekeeping to today's totally fragmented power structures. Think of this as a medical diagnosis of an institutional failure.
Okay, so let's dive right into this with a question that's been absolutely dominating the pundit sphere lately. After the recent New York primary sweeps, where we saw insurgent candidates successfully oust established incumbents, the popular narrative instantly became the story of moral failing. The story goes that the establishment is asleep at the wheel, that they're terrified of their own base, and that this is all the price of being, well, completely gutless. But is that actually true, or is there a much deeper structural reason why party leaders couldn't stop an insurgency right in their own backyard?
To answer that, here's our roadmap for today. We'll diagnose the symptoms of a hollow party, look at the fall of gatekeeping, check out A Tale of Two Coalitions, discuss the presidential exception, review the ghosts of the Hunt Commission, and finally, unpack the low trust paradox. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Symptoms of a hollow party. Diagnosing the New York primary sweep. So let's start with our immediate case study, the really acute symptoms of this institutional hollowing out. We're zooming in on June 23rd when Zoran Mamdani's DSA, that's the Democratic Socialists of America, endorsed Slate basically ran the table in New York. We saw established incumbents knocked off, despite the fact that the most powerful Democrat in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, actively campaigned for those incumbents. He picked a side in his own backyard, and his side lost.
Now look at the raw data driving this insurgency. According to recent polling, among Democrats, the Democratic Socialists currently hold a +17 net favorability rating. Contrast that with congressional Democrats as a whole, who are sitting at just a +4. I mean, that gap is massive. The insurgent brand is literally outpolling the official party brand inside the party itself. The demand for an alternative is incredibly strong, which really sets the stage for what happens next.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core thesis of our source material today. We need to pivot entirely away from the idea of cowardice. Cowardice implies a failure of nerve, right? It assumes the party could have stopped these insurgent sweeps and simply chose not to out of timidity. But reality tells a completely different story. This is a total machinery failure. You can't lose your nerve guarding a gate that you no longer own. The party hasn't lost its spine, it has lost the structural tools required to gatekeep at all.
Moving on to Section 2, the fall of gatekeeping and the rust in the political machine. How exactly did this machinery rust and fall apart? Well, to understand what we've lost, we first have to understand what a party is actually supposed to be. Back in 1950, the American Political Science Association released a report advocating for what they called the responsible party model. The whole concept hinges on one foundational power, and that is the ability to choose your own candidates. If a party can't coordinate to push acceptable candidates forward and starve unacceptable ones of oxygen, then it's not really a party. It's just a logo that somebody prints on a yard sign.
So the absolutely crucial point here is how that gate was dismantled. It didn't happen overnight. The parts just kind of rusted in place over time. First, the old geographic skeleton, the precinct captains who organized block by block, that's obsolete. Today, we have tens of thousands of mandatory committee seats sitting completely empty. Second, the aligned press that used to anoint candidates has fragmented into a million different social feeds. Third, small-dollar digital money allows candidates to completely bypass the traditional party donor networks. A candidate the party hates can raise $16 million online anyway. And finally, the ultimate signal flare, the official party endorsement, is practically dead. When Hakeem Jeffries endorses a candidate and they lose, that endorsement is no longer a lever of power, it's practically a liability.
Section 3. A Tale of Two Coalitions and their institutional immune systems. This brings us to a really fascinating comparison.
The gate has fallen for both major American political parties, but their immune systems are reacting to the disease in wildly different ways. Everyone instantly compares this to the Republican Party being captured by Donald Trump in 2016. Structurally, the mechanism is the exact same. The gate fell, but politically, the fallout is entirely asymmetric. The Republican coalition can actually survive losing its political center because its core voters, rural, non-college, evangelical, are spread highly efficiently across the Electoral College and Senate maps. They can shift right and still win places like Ohio or Texas.
The Democratic coalition, on the other hand, cannot survive losing its center. It is a highly delicate mathematical mix that requires winning the urban core, the suburbs, and the exurbs all at once in battleground states. A party that sheds its moderates simply cannot win states like Pennsylvania or Wisconsin.
Which is exactly why political scientists are watching places like Michigan with absolute fascination. Michigan is the ultimate stress test. It's a must-win state where insurgent candidate Abdul al-Sayed has been pulling incredibly well in the primary. This is where the open gate collides head-on with cold, hard electoral math. Can the party survive if it can no longer filter out candidates in states where the coalition requires total unity?
Section 4, the presidential exception, the room with no voters.
Now, I know what some of you focused learners are thinking right now. You're saying, wait a minute. If the party is completely hollow and weak, how did they manage the presidential transition so swiftly? How did they coordinate to consolidate the ticket? That is a brilliant question. And the reality comes down to the level of politics. In local and state elections, like the 2026 New York primary, the primary is open to activist voters, and the party has zero structural leverage against an open primary, hence insurgent sweeps. But at the presidential level, like we saw with the successful consolidations in both 2020 and 2024, you have top-level, elite coordination operating without a primary electorate in the room. These are entirely different institutional muscles.
And this quote from the source material captures it perfectly. It says, the party can still decide in the one room with no voters in it and almost nowhere else. Think about the 2024 swap to Kamala Harris. That wasn't a flex of a strong party. A genuinely strong party gatekeeps early. It doesn't let a visibly vulnerable incumbent stroll unchallenged into an election year, only to scramble and improvise a fix 100 days out. The 2024 consolidation was an emergency cleanup for a massive gatekeeping failure that actually happened way upstream in 2023. The party can coordinate elites in a crisis, for sure, but it cannot manage a primary electorate.
Section 5. Ghosts of the Hunt Commission. When the party rebuilt the gate.
So how do we fix the machinery? Well, history shows us that a broken gate isn't necessarily a permanent condition. The party has actually rebuilt its defenses before. Let's look at this timeline. Back in 1972, the McGovern reforms blew the nomination process wide open, and the establishment lost control of the ballot. Their response? The 1982 Hunt Commission. They deliberately created superdelegates, unpledged party insiders who could literally override a primary electorate if they were about to nominate a perceived loser. And you know what? It worked for over 30 years. But then came 2016. The Bernie Sanders insurgency framed the superdelegate system not as responsible gatekeeping, but as a corrupt, rigged establishment. The public backlash was so severe that by 2018, the party completely stripped the superdelegates of their power. The irony here is just incredible. The party's most successful structural fix lasted over 30 years, only to be dismantled entirely by the very voters it was trying to protect itself from.
Section 6, the low trust paradox. The cure the patient rejects.
This brings us to the absolute climax of this institutional crisis. Why can't we just rebuild the machine today? Because of something called the low trust paradox. Political scientists like LaRaja, Schaffner, and Gepford have proposed very clear academic blueprints to fix this. Step 1. Route campaign finance money strictly through the formal party structure, which would empower pragmatic centrists over ideological purists. Step 2. Establish real, dues-paying party memberships so the party can make transparent, binding pre-primary endorsements. Basically, you give the party a clear institutional voice before the activist primary takes over.
But here is the devastating reality. You can't rebuild a gatekeeping institution on a foundation of people who've decided the institution is rotten. We are living in a fundamentally low-trust society. Recent data shows a record share of Americans are registering as independents, not because they're hiding their partisanship, but because they genuinely despise the party institutions. They view literally any attempt at party discipline as elite corruption.
And that leaves us with this final, provocative catch-22. The exact tools needed to stabilize the political machine, more party control, more institutional leverage, formal gatekeeping, are the exact things the modern electorate will violently reject. The cure and the disease are made of the exact same stuff. How do you convince voters who already think the system is hopelessly rigged to trust the party to tilt its own primaries on purpose for the sake of long-term stability? It is the ultimate puzzle for political reform and one that's absolutely going to define the upcoming election cycles. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the mechanics and keep learning.